Why did Native Americans never develop permanent architecture the way it is on other continents? Have you been to, for example, the US Southwest, or Peru, or the Yucatan Peninsula? People often built from stone there, so you can still see the buildings. You can still see the wood heck. Sometimes you can still see the curtains in towns in the more historically arid parts of the US Southwest. They did have permanent settlements and architecture, but they also built with what they had. In fact, Plymouth was basically the Puritans taking over a leftover permanent settlement that was abandoned. The Pueblo built tons of adobe structures that are still standing. They had permanent architecture using the materials available. I believe we were taught that the various nations of the Dakotas pretty much made cabins with wood, brush, and leather. The thing is, a lot of them were destroyed thanks to how many times the Native Americans were relocated, and the ways they were encouraged to relocate. Turns out wood burns pretty well. You mean native non-Meso-Americans, right? They did have cities. Many cities. Cities made of wood which decays when everyone inside dies of the plague. People build with what they have. And wood was abundant. So abundant Europeans were coming over to get some. The Chaco culture built huge structures. Colonizers and tourists destroyed a lot of things back before we realized we should protect these sites. https://n.m.wikipedia.org Wiki Chaco Culture National Historical Park. A lot of Native American tribes were nomadic, so building something really strong and permanent was a stupid idea. I would much rather break down a tent for traveling than have to figure out how to move the Sistine Chapel every few months if you were counting the Mayans and Aztecs as Native Americans. Then they did have huge, gorgeous cities, and their pyramids are still standing to this day. According to some sources, their cities were more impressive than their European contemporaries, but the Spanish did their best to destroy as much as possible. https: despite the towering reputation of Egypt's Great Pyramids at Giza, the Americas actually contain more pyramid structures than the rest of the planet combined. Civilizations like the Olmec, Maya, Aztec, and Inca all built pyramids to house their deities, as well as to bury their kings. In many of their great city-states, temple pyramids formed the center of public life and were the site of holy rituals, including human sacrifice. The best-known Latin American pyramids include the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan in central Mexico, the Castillo at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, the Great Pyramid in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the Pyramid at Collula, and the Inca's Great Temple at Cusco in Peru. The Old World had horrible winters and not a lot of supplies other than stone to fend the cold off. Their structures lasted because they were made of stone. The Native Americans made structures out of wood, which rot away after some time. They were also really good for travel or migration, which they had to do often. They were also very strong and sturdy buildings in general, so there was no reason to innovate. Because the cement they grew in the Americas was of inferior quality compared to the Old World. It wasn't waterproof and always melted under sunlight. Thankfully, when Leif Erikson and the Nords came, they brought with them plentiful cement, and even taught the natives how to properly grow and harvest it. This allowed the natives to build great structures like the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building. The Pueblo builders would like to have a word. There are some pretty impressive stone buildings in Mesoamerica. Is this a matter of the North American environment not being as friendly to permanent settlement, or is it something else? I suspect it's more a matter of the North American environment being friendly to a semi-nomadic lifestyle. There was no pressure to settle in one place year-round. Visit the Southwest, Mesa Verde, the Casa Grande, etc. Are you just talking about the US or all of the Americas? Because in Mexico, Central America, and South America, there are quite a few examples of permanent architecture, and we're still discovering more. I live near what used to be a winter city for the native tribes. There's a local museum of Indian history that has pieces of their longhouses carbon dating to over 10,000 years ago. Before the area was settled by Europeans, the tribes used to separate during the warm months to tend their flocks and farm as small family groups, then come back to the city for the winter. Those longhouses were burned when the Native Americans were rounded up and forced to march the Trail of Tears. They did, just mostly in the south instead of the north. Have you ever seen the Mayan pyramids? I think people in this comment section are playing stupid because this guy seems like he's quite obviously talking about the natives in the US Northwest to the Great Plains. You do not seem to understand what North America is. North America is a continent that extends down to Panama. So all of the Olmec, Zapotec, Mayan, and Aztec cities are in North America. But I assume by North America you mean the US and Canada. There are stone buildings in the US, built by the Anasazi in the Southwest. They are most famous for their cliff buildings. In the rest of the US we do not find stone buildings. Instead they build giant earthworks and out of wood. That seems to be because they had ready access to wood and did not see a need to build out of stone. And those were then eroded due to weather. But the lack of stone buildings outside of the south and southwestern part of North America seems to be due to an abundance of trees, making building with stone unnecessary. Might I suggest you visit Mesa Verde National Park, then revisit your question. Aztecs, Mayans, Olmecs would like a word. It's worth pointing out many of things you think of as permanent structures are probably stone. Large parts of North America, large stones are fairly rare. If you're specifically talking about those in what is now the US and Canada, you have to understand that the pre-Columbia population was only about 3-15 million, and they were spread out over the entire north. Additionally, all the different tribes hated each other, even those in close proximity could speak entirely different languages. The low population density in such a huge area meant there was no pressure to settle in one spot or set strict boundaries. The abundance of trees in some areas meant there was no need to build anything out of stone, and in other areas Midwest they had to be nomadic to survive. Also remember, there was literally no large domesticated animals in all of the Americas. Llamas were the biggest, followed by dogs and some birds. Pretty hard to get a lot done if you have to haul everything yourself with not a lot of people to do it. The Aztecs and Mayans had truly huge populations, which had the exact opposite effect on their societies.